Service above self, honor, courage, and devotion to duty. These are core values of the United States Marines. Nick Popaditch served with distinction in the Marines for 16 years. Nick was born in East Chicago, Indiana on July 2, 1967 to working-class parents. The youngest of 5 children, Nick had a happy and comfortable childhood provided by his hardworking father, Duke, and caring mother, Dolores. A straight-A student who excelled in science and took Latin to meet his language requirement in high school, he was awarded an academic scholarship to Indiana State in his hometown. Nick aspired to establish his independence and to go to elite Indiana University, but he couldn't afford to do that. An articulate and persistent Marine recruiter offered educational benefits along with travel, adventure, and challenge. His father, a Korean War combat veteran, was amazed when his bookish, youngest son enlisted in the United States Marines. From the very beginning, Nick excelled as a Marine. After boot camp, Nick was assigned to tank school at Fort Knox, Kentucky. He was an honor graduate of the school and attained the rank of Lance Corporal. Nick would spend the next 3 years rotating between mainland Japan, South Korea, Okinawa, and Camp Pendleton, California. During that time, Nick was promoted to the rank of corporal and became a tank commander. While stationed at Camp Pendleton, Nick met April, a beautiful and intelligent young woman. It was love at first sight for Nick, and he was soon to learn for April as well. They spent every free hour together going on dates all over San Diego. April is a Native American woman, a member of the Pomo tribe that has lived in California for hundreds of years. Then, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. Nick's unit was one of the first ordered to deploy. Wanting to do the right thing, he offered to cut April loose, no obligations. April said no. We're together. That's the way it'll stay. During Operation Desert Shield, Nick was promoted to sergeant and commanded a tank with the arduous task of clearing minefields placed in the Marines' path. Later, during Operation Desert Storm, Sergeant Popaditch served at the tip of the spear. Commanding a main battle tank, he participated in the attack through the heart of the Iraqi defense. Historic in both its scope and effectiveness, the Marines drove the 4th largest army on the face of the earth out of Kuwait in less than 100 hours. While deployed, Nick had written April almost every single day, and 2 days after he returned home, Nick and April were married. After 6 years of service, Nick chose to try his hand at civilian life. He joined a construction crew in La Mesa, California, reporting for work the day after his honorable discharge. He was rapidly promoted to crew chief. However, Nick and April missed San Diego and life in the Marine Corps, so in the fall of 1995 he re-enlisted, reflecting with pride that at that point, every occupation he had held as an adult required him to wear a helmet. Back with his beloved Marines, Nick sought new challenges. He requested and was granted orders to report to Marine Corps Drill Instructor School, one of the most demanding schools in the world. He graduated 3rd highest in his class. Drill instructor duty is demanding for both the Marine and the Marine's family. The Popaditch family proved once again when times are tough, they're at their best. The family grew even closer together, and Nick excelled as a drill instructor. He was promoted to staff sergeant and wore the coveted black belt of a senior drill instructor. Following the attacks on September 11, Nick requested orders back to combat duty and was assigned as a tank commander and platoon sergeant. He deployed to the Middle East and commanded a tank in the initial invasion of Iraq and the march up to Baghdad. He was decorated for valor on the battlefield and was a subject of this historic photograph taken in Baghdad at the fall of the Saddam regime. Shortly after his units returned stateside, Nick, inspired by the Iraqi people's fight for freedom, volunteered to return to Iraq. He was assigned as a tank commander and platoon sergeant in the city of Fallujah. The outlaw city became the epicenter of the emerging Iraqi nation's fight for freedom. The murder and subsequent desecration of 4 American contractors ignited the first battle for Fallujah. Nick, now a gunnery sergeant, led the attack into the Jolan district. the most intense fighting of the Battle of Fallujah. In order to protect the Marines on foot from the withering fire, Nick requested and received permission to lead with his tank, a very risky move on the narrow streets of the city. His action saved the lives of many Marines that day, and his attack, coordinated with a gunship, laid waste to the enemy's stronghold. His innovations on the battlefield made a contribution to Marine Corps doctrine for urban warfare. For his personal valor in the battlefield, risking his life to protect Marines and to destroy the enemy, Nick Popaditch was awarded the Silver Star. On April 7th, 2004, for the first time in his life, Gunnery Sergeant Nick Popaditch lost a gunfight. Around midday, during an intense exchange of firepower, Nick was struck in the head by a rocket-propelled grenade. Blinded and deafened by the blast, Nick was still conscious, but rapidly bleeding to death. Valiant action by Nick's tank crew, despite their own wounds, saved Nick's life. Brave, selfless action by corpsmen in the field protected Nick from enemy fire. Skilled surgeons in Fallujah saved his remaining eye. An expert doctor at Balboa Naval Hospital will restore a degree of sight in that remaining eye. Because of the vision loss, Gunnery Sergeant Popaditch was obliged to take medical retirement after 16 years of arduous and faithful service in the Marine Corps. Nick was sent to the VA hospital in Palo Alto, California for blindness rehabilitation. Never giving up, he learned to use his remaining sight to begin to read and write again. Determined to continue to make a difference, Nick finally used the Marine educational benefits that motivated him to enlist 20 years earlier. He studied to become a high school teacher. He graduated magna cum laude from San Diego State University in the spring of 2011. With his typical determination, Popaditch worked from a white cane to a college diploma. Nick Popaditch recorded his journey in his memoir, Once a Marine. This book is considered a must-read for leaders in and out of the military. It was also selected for the Marine Corps Professional Reading List for 3 years in a row, in addition to receiving the 2009 Military Writers Book of the Year award. Nick is a powerful advocate for veterans' rights. His work with other wounded veterans has helped many take the necessary steps towards recovery, and he's inspired many veterans transitioning to civilian life. Nick is frequently invited to speak to corporate leaders, law enforcement officers, and active duty military groups about leadership, innovation, motivation, and courage. He is currently putting the finishing touches on his second book and is enrolled in a master's degree program in education. Nick and April, his wife of over 20 years, have just sent their youngest son to college. Their home is in Chula Vista, California. At this challenging time in our nation's history, Nick Popaditch sees another opportunity to make a difference. When times are at their worst, Nick is at his best. His entire life has been at the tip of the spear, fighting for the American people. Not just some, but all of them. He's volunteering for service once again. Nick Popaditch has the courage, compassion, skill, and perseverance to faithfully represent you, his constituents, in the Congress of the United States.